Today I want to share with you how I built this beautiful in-ear monitoring rack. It's so much more than just an in-ear monitoring system. It was really expensive. I think I spent around 12,000 Swiss francs on this baby, but I hope it's going to last a very long time, and so far it's been working perfectly. And if ever there was a fault, it was definitely my fault because I didn't know the system well enough, especially the app that goes with this. The first thing I did was I spent probably around 6 months just thinking about how many channels I need, what do I need the channels for, how many outputs do I need, how many inputs do I need, how many mics do I use usually that need phantom power. All those details, think about all that stuff. Do I use backing tracks? Do you use backing tracks? How many tracks do those backing tracks need? Is it just a stereo out, so 2 mono outputs, or is it 8 or 16 or anything in between? In my case, I'm using 8 outputs because that's all the outputs my interface has on board. How do you send the actual sound of the monitors to your musicians? Think about all those little things. How many cables do you need? Which cables do you need? I wrote it all down on my computer, and I made a little Word file with all my expenses, how much each of these items cost, and how much does the rack cost, how many cables. If a cable's just $5, but you need 64 of them, that's going to add up rather quickly. On this system, I have 32 inputs and 16 outputs, as it is right now with splitters, but I'll get into that in a moment. Now I want to show you the sketch that I made of this rack before I built it and before I decided to spend all my more or less hard-earned money on this thing that I hopefully will use a lot in the future. What I did first is I thought about which channels I'm gonna need. So this is my input list. This is one of the first drafts that I made of my input list. As you can see, I have 32 input channels, and it stayed 32 until now, until the very end. But the final input channel list that I used for my last show is actually this one, which is of course beautifully branded for the sound tech and the light tech and everybody that helps set up. They know that it's Mace to Eden, with of course my phone number, email address and website. So this is the input list that I made in my head before building the actual rack and deciding what equipment I used. So my drum set, which is just over there, the bare minimum of mics that I need is 10 mics because I have 5 toms, 1 snare, 2 bass drums, and then 2 overheads. This you can see right here. So it's kick left, kick right, snare, the 2 overheads which need phantom power. So keep that in mind. 2 overheads need phantom power. Tom 1 through 5, that's 10 for drums. Then I'm currently playing with 2 guitarists, and they both use Kempers. So it's digital amps, it's not, I don't need mics for them, but they still need inputs. The Kemper does have XLR and TRS outputs, which is great because I much prefer to work with XLR, and my rack currently only takes XLR inputs and outputs on the XLR. So thank you Kemper for that. So that's guitar B, guitar A. I don't know why I switched B and A, doesn't really matter. Then for this concert I had 3 vocalists, as you can see here. Lead vocals Pascal, lead vocals Michael, and background vocals Dora. So the BGV, he was actually the lead in the song that he sang. Then I had 4 mics for the string section, violin 1, 2, viola, cello. And these mics actually used phantom power. They were provided. I wrote down that I needed the mics. Those mics actually needed phantom power, so that's another thing to keep in mind for when you set up your rack. Then let's move on. Now we're already at channel 19, so we already filled up 19 channels, which is quite a lot. Then I had a brass section, trumpet 1, 2, horn, trombone, and tuba. And it's another 5 channels. And during the setup for my last show, I think we weren't sure which mics we were using, and I think 2 mics used phantom power and the other 3 did not use phantom power. I wrote down mic needed, and we decided almost on the spot which mic we were going to use. Now down here comes the next part, which is the playback section, the playback and the click section, which is going to depend greatly on how you do your thing. It would also work, I've seen bands do this as well, where instead of having 8 outputs, they just use 2. So they just send the sound tech, they just sent him a stereo track, basically, stereo output. That way he's got less work, but he's also got less control. So if you trust your sound guy, then send him more. And if you don't trust the sound guy, just send him the 2 channels. That way he won't be able to mess up too much. But if you trust him, which I did for this show, send him as much as possible so he has the best control he can. One judgment call that I had to make is here at the percussion and effects. I took them together because I ran out of channels. And in the tonals, there's everything. There's synthesizers, guitars, spacey stuff, basically everything that's got pitches, which the playback, percussion, and effects, they don't have pitches. But I'll talk about backing tracks in a future video, because that's a very, very interesting area that I've spent a lot of time on. The bass I've sent as a mono track. You can do stereo, but it's not necessary. I didn't put the bass in the tonal to give my sound guy a bit more control. Then track 32 is the playback and the count-offs for the band. So the click and the count-offs that lead us into a new song or a new section. That's channel 32, and this goes directly to the band, so I do not send this to front of house. This way I do not run the risk of the sound guy sending the click track to front of house, which would be terrible. And there's many YouTube videos where live shows have gone wrong because the sound dude put the click track and the count-offs in the live mix. So that's a fuck up on his side, but also the playback engineer maybe could have just said, I'm not going to send this to front of house. Depending on your system, that's possible or not. Oh, look at this beauty. It's still turned off, and I'm not going to turn it on today. You've seen the channels now that I need. This is the sketch that I made of what's behind here. Okay, I'm gonna walk you through it. You first have to think which channels do you actually need and for what, and then you can start thinking about what equipment you will need. The cases, the actual rack cases aren't on this image. That's because I just had it in my head. I needed my rack to be movable by one single person, by me or another strong person. Originally, I wanted this to be just a single case with wheels. And then I went to Thomann and I realized if I want a case with wheels, I also want it to be shockproof. That was, for one, very expensive, which it would have been okay. But the case by itself, I think it was like a 14 height units. I think it was over 50 kilos. And that's super heavy. And without any equipment in it. So there would have been the wheels, the rack, and the shock mount would have been 50 kilos, the rack by itself. Plus all the equipment, which is probably another, 20 kilos. That would have ended up at 70 kilos, and there's no way I could have lifted that up the stairs. I'm here in the basement, and there's no lift in this building. So whenever I move, I need to take the stairs, and I'm usually by myself. But 70 kilos, even if there's two of you going through the stairs here, they're very tight. It's very European. The doorways are very, very tight. Even if there's two of you, 70 kilos is just way too much. The bottom rack is way heavier than the top rack. I can now barely lift this by myself, but I can. So I can take it up the stairs. I start sweating and I don't want to do it. And if I can, I ask a friend to help me, but I can manage. I can put it in the car, no problem. So that was really important for me, to be able to move it by myself. That put me in this problem. These cables here, because I now have two racks, I had to decide what equipment goes into the top rack and what equipment goes into the bottom rack, and which cables will have to get disconnected every time I set up and break down. Let's start easy with the computer, which is this here. That's my computer, and a USB cable and an Ethernet cable. We'll forget about this for now. The USB cable connects to my audio interface, which in my case is a Mo2 interface. It's got, I think, 8 inputs and 8 outputs. And I'm not going to use the inputs because that's basically just my playback machine. The computer here is just my playback machine. I have my playback session here with my MIDI changes, my MIDI commands, my time code, and the backing tracks and the click tracks. All that information goes through this interface. This interface sends 8 outputs to these XLR splitters. I need 32 channels because earlier I decided that I need 32 channels to play a successful concert. These are rack units for 8 inputs and 16 outputs. So the way an XLR splitter works is you have one input and then every input has 2 outputs. This way I can send one output to front of house, which is signal here, and one output to the stage box for the band. Okay, so now I have this signal path. I have my computer. The computer connects to the interface. The interface sends the backing tracks to the XLR splitters. The XLR splitters send raw, untouched audio to front of house and to the stage box for the band, for me. This stage box has 32 inputs and 16 outputs. I connect all the outputs from the XLR splitters to the 32 inputs of the stage box. The stage box connects through Ethernet to my mixer. This is the brain of the whole operation. This is the actual mixer. This is in my case, the Midas M32C. I think it's like a better version or more expensive version than the Behringer X32. This is connected through Ethernet to the stage box down in the bottom rack. This mixer needs internet so that I can control it through my iPad or my phone or my computer. And for that I need a router because the rack unit itself doesn't have an inbuilt router, so I need an external router, which is this one, and it's very easy to set up. You just connect it and then you have your own little network. Through this router, my whole band can download an app and mix their own headphone mix through one of these 16 outputs. This is a power supply. The power supply, the idea behind this is to get clean audio. I don't know how well this actually works, but if there's like imbalances in the supplied power, it cleans it out and supposedly you have less noise in your audio and your electrical equipment works better. But I think with modern audio equipment, the inbuilt transformers are already good enough and you get perfectly clean audio. But that's only partially what the power supply is for. This power conditioner, I think it's called, in my case it's a Furman PS8RE Mark III. In this case, I use it to supply power to all of my equipment here. So these two racks, they only need one power outlet. That's really great, because this way I don't have 7 cables that I need to connect, that I need to ask the stagehand to get me more power. I just need one power outlet, and that's it. I'm good to go. I'm ready. Another peculiarity of my system is that I'm using the Genetics. In my case, it's the GN5. This is an image of the GN10. Genetics is an English company, and they make light controllers, DMX controllers. This has nothing to do with audio. This is purely to control light through DMX. I have this computer, which is my Playback computer. This sends a MIDI timecode to the interface simultaneously with all the playbacks and stuff. It just works out of the gate. And it's still just a USB cable, but the interface is also a MIDI interface. So in the back of the unit, I have a MIDI in and a MIDI out. The MIDI out I can send to this device, which is my light controller, my Genetics GN5. This has a MIDI in and a MIDI out. So now I can send MIDI timecode to this unit. And this unit is connected to a different computer, also through USB, and that computer has the whole light show programmed on it. So now I can program a light show and just press play on my Playback computer, and the light show just works perfectly fine every single time. That's a whole different thing, but it's what I've inbuilt into this system, and it works awesomely. Another thing is some of the prices of the equipment that I was going to buy. For example, here I bought, you can see here, the XLR splitter Phantom with the name Palmer Pro RMMS 8. I need 4 of them, which is over here. They cost 284 francs on Thomann, and it's 4 rack units high. This is my rack unit calculator, so to say. So this way I know how tall my rack has to be. Yeah, just get organized. Also, money-wise, you have to be organized. Where you buy the stuff, you have to be organized. How many rack units you actually need, not how many you think you need. Label everything. For example, some of the stuff I already had and didn't need to buy. Also, cables and little parts that you need. Just make sure you have all the little things. I only made one little mistake, which I'm actually really proud of, because it's not really a mistake. I bought TRS cables for the output of my Motu interface, and this part was just too thick to connect 8 of them side by side, and there's no way I could have known that before buying those cables, because first I only bought one and it worked perfectly, it was the right length and stuff. But then when I bought the other 7 to connect the rest of the audio, they just wouldn't go in. I kept the cables because you never know. Those are TRS to XLR cables. But that was the only maybe 40 or 50 bucks that I spent that I didn't actually need to spend to get this to work. Okay, now let's take a closer look at everything that's in here. Okay, here at the top we have the light unit, the Genetics by Camsys GN5. With this I can control up to 5 universes through DMX right out of the gate. Of course, it's a network interface, so I can, of course, use the network, and I think it's up to, I don't know, probably hundreds of universes that I can control. Right here I have 5 universes output. This is the brain of the whole operation. This is the Midas M32C. With this thing I can connect to an app, and through the app all the musicians can make their own in-ear monitoring mix. This USB port is only used to update the firmware on the device. This is my old school interface, Motu 828 Mark II USB 2.0, but it works perfectly fine. It's got inputs in here, which I don't need, a phone's output, which I sometimes use, and I'll explain to you why in a future video. And it's got, importantly, 8 outputs, which I send through these cables over here. This is the interface, and it sends 8 outputs through the cables here. And these are the 8 cables that have the backing tracks on them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you can see, there's nothing in channel 32 because that's reserved for the click track, which doesn't go into the rack splitter. It actually goes directly to the band, as you can see here. It goes directly into the stage box. So we were here at the audio interface, and this is the power conditioner. It's got power output here, and it's got, I think, 9 more outputs in the back. 6 or 9, I don't remember. I think it's 9. I think it's 3 times 3. One thing that's really cool about this unit is I can turn on the sequence that you can see here, turn it on or off. This is really handy because I can leave everything turned on, basically. Just turn on the power supply, and then it will delay all the outputs by, I don't know, 5 seconds or something. So I turn it on, the first 3 outputs will turn on, then delay 1, then delay 2, then delay 3. And this is to control the power ups and downs while turning on your audio devices. These are the splitters, which have 1 input in the front. So for example here, channel 25, and 2 outputs in the back. Do you see these cables here? These. They actually come from the back. And that's one of the outputs from the XLR splitters. 1 output goes out to front of house, and 1 output comes back to the front and plugs in. Do you see these cables? They actually come from the back this way, from the XLR splitters, and feed into the stage box. The stage box then goes through an Ethernet cable to the mixer. The mixer goes to the router that's in the back. I'll show you this in a moment. That goes to the router, and the router connects to our phones through a network, and on our phones or computer or iPads we have an app, and that app controls our headphone mixes. Then on the stage box I of course also have the 16 outputs. These are 16 XLR outputs. That's out 1 all the way to 16. I can configure it however I want. So with those 16 outputs I can do 8 stereo outs, or I can do 16 mono, or any combination. So what I did is I did 8 stereo outputs. So I bought a Y cable, I think they're called, which is 2 XLR. These are females, I think. Yeah, 2 XLR females. Feed into red is always right, black is left. They feed into a stereo TRS male cable, which I then send, and of course label everything. So of course label everything. So this is drums, this is my cable, and this plugs in into our headphone amps. Yep. Okay, let's go over to the back. We're at the back of the rack. Of course, I have everything labeled back, and then the front over here, which just helps when setting up. I'm in Switzerland, and many of these units came with English or European power outlets. That's why I have these ugly and huge adapters. That was kind of a pain and disappointing that they couldn't send the units with Swiss plugs, but hey, it works just as well. This is the back of the light controller, of the genetics, and it's got MIDI in and MIDI out, as you can see there. It's also got time code, which is audio time code. This is MIDI. I don't have any more audio outputs, that's why I'm using MIDI. And Camsys, thank you so much, because this unit is just, I don't know anything about lights, but with your unit, life's just awesome. It's also got network connectivity. That's not for internet, that's for network, for all you people that confuse network and internet. It's the same connectors, but they serve different purposes. This over here, this is the Swiss Sonic router with antennas that you can pull out and just make the range a bit more usable. But I've usually kept them in and I've had zero issues with range. I've got it velcroed onto this little rack table thingy, which makes it easy to take out and put back in and connect the cables over there. I've also secured some cables with Velcro to the top and to the sides and to the bottoms of the inside of the rack. Then this is the back of the Midas M32C. That's the brain of this whole operation, with MIDI in, MIDI out, which I don't currently use. The Ethernet connectors for the stage box, they're over here. So one's connected because I'm using one stage box with those 32 cables. Monitoring, if you're using it as a mixer with actual monitors like speakers. This is really handy and awesome, and I didn't know that it existed until I knew that it existed, and it makes rehearsals so much easier. This is a talkback mic. I had no idea the mixer had this function, and I can connect a microphone, which I have. I have a mic that's similar to the SM57, but I can actually just, it's got a switch where I can turn it on and mute it, which is really great. So when we're rehearsing or during sound check or even during the show, I can just talk into the mic and everyone in the band, everyone with headphones on, can hear my voice. This way I don't have to yell during sound check. I don't have to set up an additional mic that uses an actual channel on the mixer itself to communicate with my musicians. I can just use the talkback mic and they all can hear me. Of course, they cannot talk back. They have to use their microphones or they have to yell at me. But usually I'm the one that talks the most. Then there's a connection, another Ethernet connection, which is for, it says personal monitoring. So if you have a Behringer P16, I think they're called. I actually do have one, it's lying somewhere. That's a headphone amp where you can mix, I think, up to 16 channels yourself. So if you prefer that over the app, this works perfectly fine. I've used it a lot when I worked on cruise ships, and it's really fun, especially for musicians that stay seated or put in the same place, like keyboardists, drummers. Then I've installed the this unit, the DN32 Live. That's an awesome little helper. I can insert 2 SD cards and I can, with the press of a button, I can record everything that goes through the mixer, which is great. It's great for recording a whole show. It's great for recording rehearsals, and it's great if you wanna mix offline. So let's say you have sound check and you play. The sound tech, or you yourself, can just record the whole sound check. The band leaves, and now the sound tech can just grab those recordings. It's all in the mixer on those SD cards. They can loop parts or play the whole show or play the whole sound check or just play parts of the sound check. And it acts as if the band were playing live. So the 32 channels that were used during the soundcheck, they were recorded separately, and now they're feeding back through the exact same channels with the exact same levels and everything. And that makes everything much, much easier. And for me, if I want to record a whole show, I can just press record. It records 32 channels, and I can later go back to my computer and mix the whole thing myself. This is the back of the audio interface with the backing tracks. These are the 8 output channels. They are TRS. They go into the input of the stage box through an XLR cable. So this TRS merges into an XLR cable. It's actually the same kind of cable, just a different form factor. The power supply down here with, sorry, it was 6 outputs. And down here I have the actual stage box, which is only connected through, come on. Its only connection is this Ethernet cable, which comes from the mixer, and Ethernet goes both ways. This has all the inputs, and it feeds up to the mixer. These are the cables. These here are the cables that come from here, and this is where it gets kind of messy, as you can see. I do not like the way this looks, but I have no idea how to make it look and feel more secure. Because here I have 32 times 2 outputs. In the front, as you remember, I have 32 inputs. And those 32 inputs, each of them have 2 outputs, which means I have 64 outputs here in the back. And 32 of them feed back through these cables to the stage box. And all these cables, the ones that go up, or these cables, they all feed back to the stage box. Then I have these really skinny cables. They're very weak looking and I don't really trust them. Those are the ones that go to front of house through these cable snakes. I have 4 cable snakes with each, and each has 8 channels for outputs. And I've got this label maker, which I got from Temu, and it's not sticking that well. So I'm kind of regretting that I did this, because if I lose these labels, I have to do it all over again. I have to check 32 channels, which is a lot of work. Of course, I label everything because labeling makes life easier. And I think it's 7.5 meters long, so even on a big stage, I'll be fine. And this is my rack. I hope it was interesting and not too boring. And in the next video, we'll turn everything on and check out a bit more in detail how the things actually work.